Hello everyone, welcome to the topic of intercultural competence. In this section, I will introduce to you the concept of intercultural competence, a key set of competencies as suggested by Byron's model of intercultural communicative competence, and the relationship between teaching an additional language and intercultural competence. Before we move to the main content of the section, I would like to ask you a question. Why do we need to have intercultural competence? The answers may vary among you, but I expect we all agree that each country has its specific culture, and in different countries, people may have totally different ways to react in common situations. We need to be well aware of those differences to enhance intercultural communication. To demonstrate what I have said, please watch a video which illustrates some differences between the way Western and Asian people behave. Please be aware that the purpose of this video is only to provide some information, and there is no criticism or judgment of the appropriateness of each type of communication.
I'm gonna go to the bathroom. I'm gonna go. Yeah.
What do you think we believe from the view of the original question? Oh, yeah, sure. Okay. Why not? It's been All right.
She's so late.
Oh, I'm tired waiting for her.
I hate waiting for her.
I'm so sorry, guys. I know I'm late. I'm so
5 minutes, 30 seconds again. Alex, please. Always the same.
We're always waiting for you. Sorry I'm late.
It's only half an hour.
Where's Tu?
Ma'am?
Yes?
Can I talk to you about something?
Sure, yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. You know my boyfriend, I told you about him.
Yes.
Okay, yesterday we were talking and he asked me if I wanted like having sex with him.
Okay.
I'm okay with that. It's just like I'm not sure I'm ready because I'm really afraid of getting pregnant. And you know AIDS? It's not like I'm really afraid of that.
Okay, so don't worry, baby. Just wear a condom. That's the most important thing, okay? And if you want me to go to the doctor with you this week, we can get you on birth control too, okay? So don't worry, there's no risk if you wear a condom.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Hey, Dad? Can I ask you something? So I had a boyfriend. I told you before. He asked me if I could sleep over at his place tonight.
You're 18, you should be studying. No boyfriend, no love, and don't even mention that thing. Go to your room. Who even told you about this? How did you even know? Go to your room now!
As you can see from the video, different people from different countries have distinctive ways of behaving in certain situations. Therefore, it is essential that we must be aware of those differences. In other words, each person needs to attain a certain level of intercultural competence. So, what is intercultural competence? Generally, intercultural competence is defined as the ability of a person to behave adequately in a flexible manner when confronted with actions, attitudes, and expectations of representatives of foreign cultures. In higher education, there is a wide range of definitions of intercultural competence, and it is not easy to reach an agreement on what it is. However, one of the most common definitions is intercultural competence is the ability to communicate effectively and appropriately in intercultural situations based on one's intercultural knowledge, skills, and attitudes. The intercultural dimension in the teaching of foreign languages has become a special concern for teachers and researchers. Studies in the field of social psychology as well as studies of intercultural communication have provided insights into the linguistic and social skills, knowledge, and attitudes needed to communicate effectively and appropriately in intercultural context situations. The intercultural dimension in foreign languages emphasizes effective cross-cultural communication based on the acquisition of a key set of competencies as suggested by Byram's model of intercultural communicative competence. This model identified 5 different factors involved: knowledge, attitudes, skills of interpreting and relating, skill of discovery and interaction, and political education, including critical cultural awareness. Knowledge includes learning about social groups, products, practices, and processes of interaction. Attitudes involve curiosity and openness towards the other, as well as readiness to revise cultural values and beliefs, and to interact and engage with otherness. Skills of interpreting and relating mean the ability to identify and explain cultural perspectives and mediate between and function in new cultural contexts. Skills of discovery and interaction are related to the ability to acquire new knowledge of a culture and cultural practices, and the ability to operate knowledge, attitudes, and skills under the constraints of real-time communication. Finally, critical cultural awareness is defined as the ability to evaluate critically the perspective and practices in one's own and other culture. The primary focus of teaching based on the intercultural approach is on the target cultures. Yet, it also includes comparisons between the learner's own country and target country, thereby helping learners to develop a reflective attitude to the culture and civilization of their own countries. Thus, educating students to use a second or foreign language means to accustom them to being interculturally sensitive, by supporting them to build the ability to act as a cultural mediator, to see the world through the other's eyes, and to consciously use cultural learning skills. The relationship between the teaching of foreign language and ICC will be demonstrated through the exploration between the descriptor of the CEFR, or the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages, and ICC. Please watch this video.
The number of books and training concepts for intercultural communication available today is quite stunning. Language trainers, however, will be surprised to find that most of these do not pay attention to the role which language plays in intercultural communication. If at all, language is mentioned only to emphasize that language competence and intercultural competence are not the same, which is true, of course. On the other hand, how can anyone be competent in intercultural encounters without using language? Or to put it another way, does not true intercultural competence include communicative competence? That is, shouldn't we necessarily think in terms of intercultural communicative competence? And then, can we consider language as culture-free? Or isn't it rather so that we actually create and recreate culture in our everyday actions and interactions using language? And doesn't this always take place, even if we use a language such as English as a lingua franca? Such shortcomings of most intercultural training concepts have been pointed out by others before, and we certainly owe a lot to people like Mike Byram and many others. What we suggest paying particular attention to is using the descriptors of the Common European Framework of Reference to identify and define the specific skills needed to become an effective communicator in intercultural environments. This is the intention of the next slide. Intercultural competence is a recurring theme in the CFR, something that is made clear right from the very beginning, as this quotation from the very first page shows, and goes as far as outlining an intercultural personality as a primary goal of all foreign language education. The underlying idea is, of course, that language and culture are inextricably connected. It is also made clear that intercultural competence includes more than language competence, but affects both cognitive aspects and personality development. This is a thought that probably all experts in intercultural training can agree with. But far from limiting themselves to general statements of this type, the CFR 54 scales provide a great number of descriptors which are helpful to specify what intercultural communicative competence may mean in practical communication. Go to the next slide to see a few examples. Several of the CFR scales, among them those for sociolinguistic appropriateness, flexibility, conversation or range, etc., contain descriptors which are helpful for defining specific intercultural communicative competences. Note, for example, the descriptors for sociolinguistic appropriateness as quoted here. According to this scale, a speaker at B2, quote, can sustain relationships with native speakers without unintentionally amusing or irritating them or requiring them to behave other than they would with a native speaker, unquote. Similarly, a speaker at B2, quote, can interact with a degree of fluency and spontaneity that makes regular interaction and sustained relationships with native speakers quite possible without imposing strain on either party, unquote. Such descriptors quite aptly describe a competence level which enable anyone to communicate securely with people from other cultural backgrounds. Nevertheless, they have been criticized for relating these skills to a concept of native speakers, something which could perhaps be misleading when looking at English as a global lingua franca. In this case, native speakers of English would not necessarily be the ones to consult on issues of standard setting. We will have a brief look at this criticism on the next slide. Undoubtedly, English is the #1 language of intercultural communication today. When English is used by one or more speakers of different language backgrounds as a mutual lingua franca, the standards of native speakers of English will not necessarily apply. This is a justified criticism and indicates one of the shortcomings of the CFR in its present form. It is important, however, to note that the authors of the CFR were by no means unaware of the role of English in a globalized world. The reason for not addressing English as a lingua franca, but rather treating it as the language of only 3 of the Council of Europe's member states, was a question of language politics and policy. After all, it is one of the central aims of the Council of Europe, as of the European Union, to promote multilingualism in Europe.
As can be seen, there is a strong connection between a person's ability to speak an additional language and the awareness of intercultural differences so as to maintain smooth interaction. Additionally, in the current globalization process, the criteria to assess a person's additional language competence have changed significantly. To wrap up our section, I would like to, once again, emphasize the need to develop intercultural competence for students as learners of English. It is our responsibility to make students aware of cultural differences and create opportunities for them to learn about them. This will enhance their process of learning English and make learning informative and rewarding. Thank you.